Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. What makes a true Star Wars story? There's been a lot of debate about that going around in the last few years. Well, in my opinion, not every Star Wars entry needs to have Force users, the Jedi, Sith, or non-aligned. There doesn't need to always be aliens, clones, smugglers, pirates, politicians, or even soldiers. I'm actually not really sure what makes a true Star Wars story, but I am pretty sure of one thing: almost every good entry into the Star Wars universe has droids in it. In the main films, we have C-3PO, R2-D2, and as much hate as the sequels get, who doesn't love BB-8? Then there's HK-47 and T-3M4 from the Knights of the Old Republic. Cal Kestis has BD-1, Iden Versio has ID-10, Cassian Andor has K-2SO, and Marva has B-2EMO. The clones had the Clankers, and the Rebels just had Chopper. Lando had L-337, the droid revolutionary. Kenobi's Leia had Lola, and who can forget that loader droid, Ned B, whose death was a whole lot sadder than his master's, Tala Durth. Boba Fett had 8D8, who went from dungeon torturer to strategic advisor. Even The Mandalorian, which features a main character who has PTSD from droids murdering his entire family, has the delightful IG-11, who had to go through rehabilitation after Din Djarin shot him in the neuroprocessors. Droids are extremely important in the Star Wars story, and that is because they are our creations. They have a lot of our strengths and inadvertently a lot of our weaknesses. They serve as a mirror towards our own actions and behavior. And also that selflessness, that desire to serve, makes them so endearing.
You'll have a lot to contribute. Human life is so short. They don't ask that much of us. Organics created us. It's the least we can do.
Endearing in the same way we love our dogs, cats, emotional support miniature horses, seeing eye hedgehogs, attack koalas, and guard pandas. I'm listing way too many things right now. It's gonna be really hard to find footage. Congo is going to kill me. Packs of landmine detection penguins. But anyway, the Ahsoka series has been a huge surprise for me. In the first few episodes, I thought, oh, this is the usual Dave Filoni content. This is going to be average. It's gonna be predictable. But it really does seem that Filoni has gone all out with this show. And what's really cool about it is it feels 100% Star Wars. The guy really understands the lore and the fans. But he's also making tweaks to the old Star Wars formula that we know and love, which is making the story a lot more uncertain and refreshing and new. That was always the challenge in the post-George Lucas era. Finding stuff that would meet the older fans' extremely high expectations, but also creating something new enough that wouldn't bore or confuse newer fans. I think it's great to see Filoni mature and progress as a creator and create content that the majority of viewers seem to like, which is as hard as training a grizzly bear to be a Walmart greeter. And a sign of this progress is Huyang, who is the droid that Dave Filoni first created for the Clone Wars, and now he's becoming one of the most interesting droids in all of Star Wars lore. For starters, this droid is over 25,000 years old, built specifically in 2520 BBY. This isn't just some random number, mind you. I think Filoni deliberately chose this number, because around 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Republic was created, the Galactic Senate was started, and the Galactic Constitution that was designed to bring peace and stability and civility to the galaxy was written. It was also during this time that the Jedi Order was founded, the same Jedi Order that Huyang serves. It's not entirely known if Huyang served the Jedi the entire 25,000 years. It's stated that he's been the Jedi Order's lightsaber architect for centuries. What we do know is that Huyang has lived through and probably seen all of the major events in recent Star Wars history, and he intimately knows the Jedi Order. He helped Grand Master Yoda build his lightsaber.
Quite an eventful mission.
The most eventful since the time Master Yoda went to find his lightsaber crystal. What?
He helped Bel Zettifar during the High Republic era. He even watched over a troubled and unsure Mace Windu when he was a youngling. It's kind of shocking imagining Mace Windu as a child, especially a child who lacks confidence in himself. But it's not shocking for Professor Huyang. He has a clear-eyed view of the truth, the entire truth, and that only can come from seeing the entire story. Like the Jedi Masters who have passed on and become one with the Force, Huyang has a more non-linear view of time, and that's because he can access all of these memories in his databanks that he seems to have preserved very well along with the rest of his body.
Still in one piece?
Oh yes, and still 75% original parts.
Unlike other lesser droids, Professor Huyang's never really had a memory wipe, I'm guessing. He's not really property of any other human being or sentient being. He's one of the rare droids who's actually independent in the galaxy. And there's also something about his programming that allows him to not suffer from random psychotic behaviors and other glitches associated with not having your memory wiped. Whereas Chopper couldn't really deal with all of his crazy trauma and past memories, it seems like Professor Huyang, in his wizened age, has figured it out. He's balanced and he's patient. He can appreciate the power of Jedi Masters like Mace Windu and Yoda even more because he's seen their journey and development from youngling to master. But he also has this humbling ability to look at these powerful Jedi Masters and see the children they once were that's now being hidden by years and years of experience, training, discipline, social pressure. And unlike us humans who have terrible memories and forget what we were like last week, let alone what we were like as children, Professor Huyang has seen it all. He's seen all of the potential paths that these younglings can take, and that makes him a terrific nurturer of younglings. You know, many of us, when we get older, we forget what it's like to be young. We become afraid, cynical, and even hateful of younger generations. And that's because it seems like they're so different from what we were like when we were kids. And so it's common for older generations to lament that the younger generations are aimless and hopeless. And that's because our memories are short. We forget what it's like to be a child, to see the world with new and fresh eyes, to have that optimism that we all once had. We forget how older generations used to criticize us and make fun of our trends and mindsets as well. The older generation, we also forget that the world that these younger kids are growing up in was shaped by our actions and our designs. These kids are the way they are because of us. We bear a lot of responsibility for how they turned out. And while they are young and helpless, not able to drive policy decisions or shape how the world works, it's our duty and responsibility to build the world not just for ourselves, but for future generations. We shouldn't be laughing and making fun of what they're doing right now. We should be observing them, learning more from them so that we can better guide and mentor them. We can be the greatest generation by planting trees in whose shade we will never sit in. It's an old Greek proverb that I'm sure Professor Huyang agrees with, which is why I'm afraid that he's gonna die. It's either him or Carson Teva. I mean, damn you, Filoni, ahead of time if you do this. But anyway, this perfect memory and clarity of mind is what makes Professor Huyang so brilliant and able to mentor the next generation. I don't know what his original calling in life was when he was built, but he's definitely found his purpose now. Actually, his name, when translated into Chinese, which is Hu and Yang, are the words for protect and raise. A droid like him with so much experience and wisdom probably wants what every other enlightened being really wants, and that's to create peace and stability in the world. This is one of the most noble things an individual can work towards in their life. I mean, there's so much wonder in the galaxy, so many amazing opportunities, so much creativity, potential for cooperation, compassion, and kindness. There's so many beautiful and interesting creatures and people to meet. And Professor Huyang probably realized at one point the biggest impact he can have on the world is by serving the Jedi Order, a flawed organization that seems to want to do good. And although he doesn't have a connection to the Force, he can help become a positive figure in every one of these Jedi younglings' life. And for individuals who are older, like Grandmaster Yoda, who's seen hundreds and hundreds of Jedi youngling pass through the Order, Professor Huyang is probably the only individual he could actually relate to and have conversations with. And when the Sith destroyed the Jedi Order and their temple, ripping apart the archives, the one thing they missed, the most important data bank, resided in Professor Huyang's head. Within his memory banks, the Jedi of old still exist, their history, their philosophy, even more mundane things like their day-to-day protocols.
Where were you?
I was keeping the ship at a safe distance.
If you didn't keep at such a safe distance, maybe we wouldn't have lost communication.
I am just following standard Jedi mission protocol.
He even has an archive for every lightsaber he's ever built for every Jedi younglings that pass through the halls of the Jedi Temple.
In the last 500 years, I've only known one student who built a saber such as this. Baylan Skoll. He disappeared at the end of the Clone Wars, like so many Jedi.
Professor Huyang is also cursed by his knowledge and perfect memory. When he mentioned Baylan's skull, there's a hint of sadness at the end of the sentence when he reflects on the disappearance of so many Jedi. So many younglings that he personally taught that were never able to reach adulthood and their full potential. Droids are clearly capable of love and emotions. They aren't Jedi after all. And no one aside from maybe some of the older members of the Order like Yoda knew as many Jedi who perished during Order 66, and no one had as clear memories of them as Huyang did. And this droid seems to have a tremendous capacity for caring for others. And look at how he interacts with Sabine Wren. That sass and that sarcasm, that is a sign of life, of sentience.
It doesn't matter. I never had the talent, the abilities. Not like Ezra.
That much is true.
And sometimes he can be downright rude, as if he doesn't understand what his words are doing to other people's feelings.
I have known many Padawans over the centuries, and I can safely say your aptitude for the Force would fall short of them all.
But this is not droid-like behavior. This is not him being cold. It's him being human-like. It's him trying to distance himself away from yet another student he has to teach us, who could potentially die. And more importantly, Professor Huyang wants to let Sabine know exactly what she's capable of doing and what she's not. He wants her to have the most accurate assessment of her situation, which he thinks will lead to her best chance of survival. You see, Professor Huyang cares a lot about his students. He always has.
Well then. I won't waste any more of her time.
The only time you are wasting is your own.
He cares a tremendous amount, and being one of the oldest droids in Star Wars history, it only makes sense that he also has the greatest capacity to care as well.
May I make one request of you both? Stay together. You always did better that way, in my opinion.
Which means he has the greatest capacity for sorrow.
I told them to stay together. But they never listen.
You know, when K2SO died, in the last 10 seconds of his life, he ran like a million different calculations. He tried to figure out how he could save Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso's life. He thought about how he could preserve his own life and also complete the mission. Within the second or two, he realized for his master to survive a bit longer, his own life needed to be forfeited. And for the mission to succeed, they all needed to die. And so within 9 seconds before dying, he made the choice to seal off the door to the archive room to delay the stormtroopers who were trying to stop Cassian and Jyn from stealing the Death Star plans. This would cut off his own escape. And with his last second of life before his processors shut down, what does he think about? Well, he creates an artificial simulation where Cassian Andor actually does survive, and it gives him a moment of joy. I'm telling you this scene not only because I want you to understand how much droids care about their masters and the people around them, but also how quickly they can think and how much they can think over such a short period of time. I have no idea how long Professor Huyang stood there staring off into the distance holding Sabine's helmet, but I'm sure he could have made all the calculations that K2SO did and try to figure out what the possibilities of Sabine and Ahsoka's survival are. But then again, he's much older and wiser than K2SO. He's seen a lot more as well. He probably realizes in his collaboration with Force users and with humans in general that calculations aren't always that accurate and that overanalyzing things is just going to create more problems. He's probably gotten more and more human over the years, which is why I think he's just probably going through his memories, playing scenes in his head of Sabine and Ahsoka together. He's memorializing them, trying to make himself feel better. You know, Professor Huyang, with all that knowledge in his head, has the ability to restart the Jedi Order once again. Forget about all the ancient texts and artifacts that Luke Skywalker tried to look for. Huyang always had that knowledge safe and secure in his head. But I think there's a reason why Huyang isn't with Luke. Maybe he foresees Luke's new Jedi Order's failure. Or perhaps he simply just doesn't want to be involved in such an operation anymore. Yet Professor Huyang chooses to be with the Jedi still, and specifically Ahsoka, not Luke, and I think that's because Luke was never one of his students. Whereas Ahsoka was. She's probably one of the last students he still has that's alive. And while everyone sees Ahsoka as this wise and older Jedi monk-like figure who can solve any problem, Huyang sees that, but he also sees the younger, more uncertain and brash Snips. And I think it's important for him to be there to aid Ahsoka. He cares about her, just like he cares about all of his students. And maybe this is his way to deal with the trauma of the death of all those younglings and Jedi that he couldn't save during Order 66. And so, of course, when Ahsoka comes to from her fall into the ocean, it's Professor Huyang who is first to greet her. And he's holding a small warm beverage, a small gesture that really means the world for an old, tired droid like him.